Hey everyone, Adwin's here. Oh god, this is gonna sound awful, isn't it? Hey everyone, Adwin's here, and I'm just here to give my thoughts on the MagiReco anime, the two episodes that have aired so far. Now, I know I'm a little late on the hype train here, but I was sick last week, as you could tell from the previous clip, so I didn't do it. And now that I've got time, I'm going to be going for another Aimless Thoughts, which is a barely scripted video on my thoughts on a certain topic. Of course, that in this case, that would be the anime. I'll try to do this in as few takes as possible, but the first recording session I did for this was about an hour or so long, and I ended up having like an 18-minute recording, which is about as long as the episode, and that's not what I want to do. So, here's take two, and hopefully I'll be able to clock in at a little shorter time. So the first and probably the most major thing about this episode that I think it does well is the setup. And we see this in the very first scene where we hear the quote, rumor of magical girls, where we are introduced to the basics of magical girls, as in like how they become magical girls and what they do once their wish is granted. And it's played as a conversation between three classmates over a scene of our main character, Iroha Tamaki, helping a little girl find her lost cat, but then she's attacked by a witch on the train. Now, I think this scene does a good job of pacing itself, as whatever's on screen matches what the girls are saying, and especially with how relatively light the conversation between the classmates are, you see on screen how intense the battle is, or at least how high the stakes would be. And longtime fans will know how high stakes can be in Madoka. And so it's a nice little juxtaposition between what you hear and what you see. Because, that is to say, the classmates, they don't really know what's going on with the whole magical girl stuff. Even though they're, scared of the witches and all, they're pretty much just blowing it off like some rumor. But we're seeing Iroha dealing with the witches in real time, and she's fighting for her life. And this is further exemplified at the very end, where the classmates conclude that fighting witches would be worth whatever wish they had, and then their wishes is like petty shit, I don't want to be fat, I don't want to have to study, and that's fine because they don't really know the weight of their wish. And that naivete, I think, really adds to how well the scene sets up the magical girls in general. Then it also does a pretty okay job at setting up Iroha's living situation, in which her parents, just fuck off to some other place on business, and her school life, in which she doesn't really have very many friends. No one hates her, but she's just kind of lonely. Especially on the train, we see a shot of the girls, talking to each other. Meanwhile, Iroha is a couple seats away, just sitting by herself. Life for her just seems to pass on by. She's not exactly the most passive person in the world. She can take care of herself, and she kind of held her own in the witch battle, but she isn't really living life, per se. She questions at the end of one of the scenes, is being a magical girl really something I want to do? It sets up Iroha's internal conflict pretty well, though it's not really emphasized as much. It's still good that it was established. She's not depressed or anything, but she acknowledges that there's this hole in her life, something's missing. And speaking of stuff that's missing from Iroha, there's the matter of her wish and certain visions that she's having. So, in short, Iroha doesn't remember what she wished for, and this is really weird because that's not supposed to happen. That's why you're a magical girl in the first place. And then we have these visions of this girl that, for some reason, Iroha feels a strong connection to. And Kyuubi's no help, he doesn't remember either, and thus we have a little bit more insight on Iroha's inner conflict, in which she's trying to figure out her life's purpose. The wish, which is supposed to be her reason for fighting, her reason to be a magical girl, and this mysterious person who she feels a strong connection to, but just can't grasp exactly what that is. And now we move on to the scene on the train with Kurue. Now, real quick about Kurue, I think she's an okay foil for Iroha. She's not the most controversial person, but I feel like I should talk about her anyway. But anyway, Kurue is the one who kind of urges Iroha to help investigate the rumor of Kamihama, where supposedly you could be saved from being a magical girl. Now, I don't remember exactly how it went down in the game, but but I'm pretty sure Iroha's decision to go to Kamihama was of her own volition after she has a dream about a girl who's oddly familiar to her tell her to go to Kamihama where she could be saved. And while that plot worked out on its own in the game, I think having the second person kind of helps smooth things out for Iroha. Now, I have a really minor issue with this scene in that, like, it takes the motivation away from Iroha. Like, Iroha doesn't really have a reason to go to Kamihama at this point. Kuroe gives a good explanation why she wants to go, but it's not quite there for Iroha, which, it's just a minor issue. Though maybe a few seconds of silence of inner reflection, or maybe a mention of Iroha having the same dream, that could have helped us along, but it's not really that big of a deal. Kuroe isn't really set up as well as Iroha in other aspects. Like, sure, we learn about her wish, we learn about why she doesn't like being a magical girl anymore, but I don't really feel a strong connection to Kuroe as I do to Iroha, though that just may be biased because Kuroe is a completely new character. Overall, I think the decision to have someone on the magical girl side to be an acquaintance to Iroha, I think it's a good idea. I'm not gonna look for them to really go somewhere interesting with this and all that crap. I just think it's pretty cool that, Iroha isn't completely alone. She at least has someone she can relate to as far as magical girls go. And while I say that setup is probably the episode's best trait, it also led to one of my biggest issues. Because during this scene with Kuroe, it kind of goes a little further into the whole magical girl system, but it leaves out a particular detail. And no, I'm not talking about the, quote, big secret. Just some quick context. I was watching this with some friends. A couple of them have not seen the original Madoka series. And they were interested in watching it because I talked to them about MagiReco all the time. So, they were like, okay, let's go watch this together and we'll have a good time. And I gotta say to those guys, because you're probably watching this, I hope you're watching this, I really appreciate you guys taking an interest in this with me, even though you didn't see the original one. I'm just looking forward to watching the rest of my series with you guys, because it's honestly a great time. But anyway, so I was also watching this, or at least trying to watch this, from the perspective of a complete newcomer. So what I was looking for was a decent explanation of the system, which for the most part it did, but the detail it was missing was grief seeds. Now, Kuroe briefly mentions grief seeds, and she mentions that witches drop grief seeds and we get them and we need them. But maybe a couple more sentences would have explained exactly why they needed the grief seeds, because that's where the stakes come from when being a magical girl. Because you can't just keep fighting witches forever. Even if you're really strong, you can't just do that forever. Your soul gem is like a battery. When the battery drains of energy, you need to replenish it or recharge it with grief seeds, which drop from witches. See, easy explanation, no spoilers needed. They needed to integrate that explanation into Kuroe's, dialogue, because otherwise we don't really understand what the stakes are when fighting these witches, other than death. Granted, death is a pretty big deal, but I feel like if they emphasize it more, it would give us a little bit more understanding on why magical girls would want to be, quote, saved. Then suddenly Boxwood, the witch from the beginning of the episode, suddenly comes back and conveniently brings them to Kamihama, and we get a little glimpse of exactly what they're dealing with in Kamihama, because they happen to run into Zenobia, another witch who's based in Kamihama, who just, rips Boxwood in half. If that isn't evidence of how strong this witch is, especially in comparison to Boxwood, who Iroha was already having trouble with, then I don't know what is, and I don't know why the fuck Iroha would try to fight that thing, especially with Kuroe injured like that. I don't know. Maybe they wanted to set up a situation where Iroha had to be saved, but, you could have just had her sit there and, be worried about Kuroe, and then Yachiyo would have appeared and ripped Zenobia in half too, I guess, and everything would be just the same. Speaking of Yachiyo, oh my god, Yachiyo, I love Yachiyo so much. She's so cool. I love the way they animated her head veil thing, different from the chains that she has in the game. I'm guessing it's easier to animate, which is understandable. But her appearance here kind of matches what it is in the game. She saves Iroha and I guess her friend now, and she tries to shoo them away because you're not strong enough to fight these witches, and by the way, this is someone else's property. You can't hunt here. Scram. So Iroha almost immediately backs away while Kuroe stands up for herself and says, hey, no, this is why we're here. This is what we wanted to find out. and I think this is another interesting dynamic between Iroha and her new friend. Still, Yachiyo turns her away, and, well, I guess the episode is pretty much over. We end on a pretty nice scene showing a montage of girls who are resolving to go to Kamihama because they are tired of being magical girls. And we also see a montage of wishes being posed as street signs. I think that scene was really cool. It really kind of heightens the stakes for, like, people really want to go to Kamihama with the promise of salvation. And I encourage you to go back through the episode and look at that montage of wishes, because there is an interesting wide variety there. Players of the game will recognize plenty of them. I think actually all of them are references to the game, but even if you haven't played the game, there are some pretty interesting ones there. And how do they end it all? Why, Kyubey, please, cure Ui's disease. That's right, we get Iroha's wish at the end of episode 1. Now, at first, I was really upset at this because they had all this great setup, and they're just gonna ruin the mystery right now? But then I gave it some thought and realized, well, that's how they did it in the game as well. But more importantly, the mystery about what exactly Iroha's wish is doesn't really answer other more important questions. In fact, knowing her wish actually likens it more to those apparitions that she's been seeing. Like, she knows that she has a strong connection to this Ui person, but she doesn't know exactly what it is. She doesn't know who Ui is. And so the new mystery is, or at least the mystery that was always there but is now a little less subtle, is who is this Ui person and why does Iroha not remember her, or her wish for that matter. And so that's episode 1. It's pretty good as a setup episode. It had some good fights other than, Iroha just sitting around with her armed crossbow, even though it was probably designed for her to move around in it. And it was just a really great watch overall, and I was really excited to see the next episode, which I'm going to talk about next anyway, so yay. We start off by adding on to that last flashback, and after a quick reminder of Iroha's actual wish and the name of the girl she wished to protect, she starts her investigation. Now, sadly, this leads directly into another witch's labyrinth, but she's saved pretty handily by 3 new magical girls, Momoko, Rena, and Kaede. These girls and their dynamic are established fairly quickly, both in the fight scene versus Rebecca and in the coordinator's waiting room. It's necessary to introduce them this way because they're such an integral part of this leg of the story, at least, the introduction to the rumors of Kamihama. And for what it's worth, I think they do it pretty well. Their actions and dialogue give us a really good sense of who they are and how they act with each other. Like, Kaede is the nice, shy one, who's probably a little weaker than people would like. Momoko is the Genki big sis type. And Rena is the really blunt one, but she's also fairly practical. Well, blunt already means practical, but in a bitchy tone. More specifically, she's hesitant to help Iroha because, well, they're already working on a more important mission, and they're not even sure if they can trust Iroha. I mean, that's reasonable. I think that's reasonable. But things get a little more intense in the Gotcha Burger. Because, they're rolling for those 5-star burgers, and you know how stressful that can be. So the girls try to make a plan. Rena has some obvious objections to it because she'd be sneaking into a hospital, and I'm pretty sure that's a crime. But no, Kaede still has to argue with Rena about, her not wanting to do this. And as things heat up, I'm like, wow, things are really getting intense here. I was like shaking a little bit. Even not knowing the backstories of these girls, you could really feel the emotion behind, especially Kaede's words when she was like legitimately hurt by Rena insulting her wish, and the desperation when she tried to come back with, "This is why you don't got friends, girl." And I'm gonna try not to like do a play-by-play of the argument because I think that kind of downplays how tense that entire scene was. But even after it was over and after Kaede runs out, Momoko tries to comfort Rena, which is great, but she does a terrible job of it. And I think that also added a little bit more tension. Because at this point, we had already known that Momoko was basically the leader. She was supposed to help fix everything, but she can't. Not all the time, and definitely not right now. Even though this kind of thing is commonplace for the trio, she can't be guaranteed to fix things right on the spot. Then right after, Momoko explains exactly what the girls were looking for before they met. And so we are introduced to the rumor of the friendship-ending staircase. And by golly, it was such a fun listen. The odd visuals, the enthusiasm of the voice actresses as they talk about the rumor, wonderfully backed by the accordion with a mysterious yet alluring vibe. It's almost as if the speakers are advertising the rumor, making a good show of it so people will listen and spread the rumor themselves. A far cry from the down-to-earth, somewhat intimate, relatable rumor of the magical girls from the first episode. But I think that was intentional, and I think it was executed wonderfully. Then the mood takes a sudden turn for the more somber as we get near complete silence except for Kaede's footsteps as she walks down the hallway of her school, down to the legendary friendship-ending staircase, and stares at it in disbelief. Now, we don't see exactly what she sees, but considering what we just heard, I think you've got a pretty good idea. But yeah, another wonderfully paced and atmospheric scene that transitions a little less gracefully into the search for Rena. They find her, and of course Rena decides to run away, and I don't know why she keeps trying to transform even though she's not losing them in any way. They're like right behind her. But anyway, they catch up to her. Kaede tries to apologize, but then these monstrous figures appear and start to taunt Rena about her friendship with Kaede and the others, about her decision to write their names on the staircase, about Rena herself. And while it doesn't quite reach the same level of intensity that the argument did, I could still feel the pressure on Rena. And the episode ends with the monsters taking Kaede away and confirming that it was her name written on the 7th step. Oh, but not before an amazing ending sequence featuring my favorite character in the entire series, Yachiyo Nanami. Honestly, I did find it kind of strange that they gave this ED to us before Yachiyo really did anything, but at the same time, it's fucking Yachiyo. I love Yachiyo so much. I'm so glad that she got the focus that she did, in here anyway, and I'm hoping that this is an indication in future episodes that she will have this level of focus. So overall, great introduction to the story of KMR, and great atmosphere in the relevant places. Now, there are a couple main flaws that I want to get into before moving on to episode 3. Namely the pacing, I guess. Like I said, I like the way KMR was introduced here, but it really did just kind of move really swiftly. I mentioned earlier that this was a good thing, and I do think it is, but it could be off-putting, because now we've been introduced to the next leg of Iroha's story, figuring out the nature of her missing sister, but suddenly we're thrown into the KMR story. And the game kind of does this too, but it eases us into it a little more. And I watched it with the same friends as I did last week, and they said that it went like way too fast into the next arc. And so they were caught off guard and confused. And I think especially one in particular wasn't necessarily invested in KMR as quickly as the rest of us were. So I'm sure that would have affected his enjoyment of the episode. The friends who hadn't seen Madoka are also not used to the weirdness that Madoka is known for. So when there's like a lot of odd visual stuff happening, I can understand that it just gets confusing, especially with how fast the story is moving along. It's hard to keep track of. Wow, I breezed through this one. Well, I guess we're moving on to episode 3. We start off with another flashback, this time introducing Ui's two friends in the hospital, Toka and Nemu. Toka makes an adorable little choo-choo train which almost burns down the hospital apparently, and she and Nemu, the other girl, get into like a relatively small argument, and they say they're ending their friendship right then and there. Now, this flashback not only sheds a little bit more light on Ui and, her friends, but it's a very clear parallel to what's going on with KMR right now. ending the friendship over something really fucking stupid. Now, this was especially fucking stupid. Like, it did not reach the same level as Kaede and Reina did at all. Which I'm actually okay with, because it seems that this was more to introduce Toka and Nemu to the story, as another clue to help Iroha with her investigation. Like, the parallel is still there, and it's important, but it wasn't the focus, and that's alright. The girls, minus Kaede of course, meet up after school, and we can assume that Momoko played hooky because of her bedhead. But anyway, they head off to the coordinator's shop to get some help. Last time we were here, she was missing, but this time we finally get a full glimpse of Mitama Yakumo. And they very clearly indulge in just the Mitama-ness of Mitama. Like, pretty much everything about her in this scene is so alluring. The way she moves, the way she talks, and of course the way she looks. I mean, just look at her. As she's one of the more important supporting characters in the story, I would say that they also did a good job of introducing her here. Her personality, vibe, atmosphere, all of it is really clear. And they didn't even have to show off her own pervy tendencies by making Iroha take off her shirt. Speaking of characters, Yachiyo appears to us again, hallelujah, and we see Yachiyo's own brand of bluntness and bitchiness, saying that weaker magical girls would only get in the way and cause more problems, which, it is also reasonable. I wouldn't say she was nicer than when she appeared in the first episode, but at least here her intentions are a little clearer. I particularly love the holds on Rena's and Yachiyo's faces when they have a little stare down. Adds just the right amount of tension for the scene. In fact, it makes me wonder if this parallels Kaede and Rena's first argument in episode 2, with Rena being on the, quote, nicer side this time. But I guess there's enough differences between the two that the connection can't really be made. But I will say about Yachiyo's character, one thing I really liked here was that even though she's still a bitch, she gives a very important lesson to Iroha. That you can try all you want, but if you don't get stronger, if you don't improve yourself, people around you will suffer and it will be your fault. People who are more savvy to Yachiyo's backstory should pick up on exactly how important this lesson is, especially for Yachiyo personally, and her instilling this lesson to Iroha this early, and in an actual teacher-like tone, and not in a bitchy one like she has been this whole time, that's pretty good. After being adjusted, the girls go to the school where the staircase is and enact their plan, which is to have Yachiyo and Momoko write their names on the staircase, and then have them make up so the witch would be lured to them. It doesn't quite work out between those two, presumably because there was no bad blood between them, so there was no breakup to mend. But this isn't entirely true, but that's a story for later. Rena then takes the apology into her own hands and, well, it's an apology of sorts. It's not the kind that you're expecting, but it was really well done, very emotional and sincere. And upon hearing it, the monsters appear again to taunt Rena and take her into the staircase witch. We then get a very interesting scene highlighting Rena and her very deep-seated self-loathing. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of blindsides us, but it gives us a nice Cliff Notes version of Rena's psyche. I mean, there's a lot going on during this scene in terms of symbolism, dialogue, things like that. I won't get into it here to keep the timing at least a little shorter, but I recommend you watch it at least a couple times, try to catch all the details and stuff. It's really good, though it's not perfect either. I think maybe they should have tried to shove this in a place where it would have a little bit more room to breathe. Here, it was just kind of odd. Like, some of my friends thought that it was a witch making an illusion or something. But eventually Kaede appears and breaks through to Rena. They have a little talk while the action is happening, and honestly it's hard to follow the dialogue and the action at the same time, but that's just because I was reading subs and it's just a little harder to keep track of. The action itself was a wonder to look at, of course. Seeing Yachiyo in action again, of course, made me really happy, and unfortunately Iroha was useless again, but at least she wasn't in the way like Yachiyo thought she would be. Oh, and Tiny Cubei's there too, who does absolutely nothing. After all this, Kaede and Rena finally make up, somewhat, But the difference here this time is that Reina is the one who apologizes to Kaede, and all's well that ends well. But then Yachiyo points out that the witch did not drop a grief seed. After listing a few more oddities about this particular witch, she warns the others just to be careful for now, and goes on her way, but not before complimenting Momoko and her team. Why do you say that now? No reason. There is a reason. Later, we see Rena briefing to Iroha what she found out when she broke into the hospital. She wasn't able to find out much, but finding out even just a little bit of information really makes Iroha happy. A small step to solving the mystery, but it's a step nonetheless. And thus, we put a cap on KMR's story, at least for now, and we can continue with Iroha's main story. And after the credits, we get a little teaser. So we see that Kyubei detects some shit going down in Kamihama, but...
あなたが上浜市へ入れないって本当なの？
入れないというか、上浜市の中では意識を保つことができないんだ。
So he enlists the help of, oh my god, it's Mommy! Mommy's back! The Holy Quintet is confirmed! So anyway, this episode actually had a little bit more of a pacing problem than the previous two, mainly during the fight with the staircase and Rena's psychoanalysis. Despite that, the rest of the episode was pretty good. It basically ties up the loose ends given to us by episode 2, and also transitions us back into the main story. It gave us some good Yachiyo, it gave us some good Midama, and it gave us some great transformations. Oh my god, I didn't talk about the transformations! Well, to put it as quickly as I can, as the first proper transformation sequences that we've got in the anime, they were all pretty good. Now, the transformations in each episode were handled a little differently, so I'm wondering if they're going to continue that trend if they continue to do full transformation sequences. And honestly, I hope they do. Because as much as I love the transformation sequences, I can understand if they would get tiring if we keep doing the same ones over and over again. But by god, Yachiyo's was my absolute favorite. She looked amazing. And Momoko looked badass, forging her own sword with her fucking foot. Rena's was pretty cute too. I don't really have much to say on that one. And my homegirl Iroha just jumps off a building. I don't know, maybe I'll talk a little bit more in depth on them in the future, but for now I just gotta say that they were all fucking amazing and I can't wait for more. So in conclusion, after talking about all three of those episodes, I gotta say I really love the anime so far. I've been playing the game since launch in JP, or at least close to launch, and I just have a really serious attachment to the characters, and it's so wonderful to see them all in motion and talking and stuff like that, though they were already talking in the game. But I'm especially glad that the anime isn't just going beat for beat what the game does as far as the story goes. While I can't imagine they would stray too far from the game's story, there's enough differences here, like the straight up existence of Kurue, that I'm really interested to see where they take the story. So I'm enjoying it, my friends are enjoying it, can't wait for next week. If you haven't seen the anime yet and you're interested in it, go ahead and give it a watch. If you've already seen the anime, tell me what you think in the comments below, and tune in next week for some more MagiReco content.